Absolutely. And, one of the things that you don't shy away from in the book is that, feminists have to fight for women, even if we don't agree with them. And that a lot of the women in the book have very unpalatable views, I think it's fair to say, that we wouldn't consider to be particularly PC today. And the title of the book is Difficult Women, and it does come from a very specific place. Could you kind of indicate where that came from?
Yeah, well, it's about the fact, first of all, that in order to change anything, you have to just be obstinate, and all the things that women are told not to be. Be kind. Why can't put other people first? Be selfless. Be the angel in the house. Mum will kiss it better. All of that kind of stuff that says, don't. Put yourself second. Don't push yourself forward. Don't be ambitious. That great Chimamanda Adichie. You can have ambition, but not enough that it threatens the man.
Yeah.
And that was one meaning of difficult. And the second was about how difficult it is to make progress happen, and how often you are slogging away for years or even decades. The right for women to vote, they went through the whole of the 19th century with sort of endless petitions and bits of civil disobedience, and really slogging away at that. And then the third meaning, as you say, is the idea that people who achieve fundamental change or who spearhead movements are often quite difficult. Now, I've started work on my new book, which is about genius. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that great visionary CEOs, sort of kind of Steve Jobs kind of figures, it's highly correlated with being a productive, i.e. not a sort of dysfunctional, but a narcissist. Somebody who seeks glory, who is quite grandiose, who, is quite comfortable with people sort of saying, you're my idol, or whatever it might be, because those are the people who end up inspiring people to kind of follow them. I think there's a parallel here in this book with the fact that, these women who fought these fights had to be kind of monomaniacal. The suffragettes are really notable for this. Sylvia Pankhurst, the third Pankhurst daughter, got kicked out of the suffragettes by her mother and sister because she appeared on a platform with a Labour politician. First of all, you're campaigning alongside men. And secondly of all, it was for, I believe, a miners' strike action. Second strike. It wasn't about the vote. They were supposed to do one thing only. They weren't a political party. They were campaigners for the vote. And, the Pankhurst was super dictatorial. They fell out with pretty much everybody. And actually, to an extent that historians are still arguing now about whether or not that became really counterproductive. They became too militant. And if the First World War hadn't started, they would have killed probably numerous people.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also, it's not just even that women are difficult and that they, you kind of rub people up the wrong way, but you have people like Marie Stopes who dabble in things which are very, very, difficult to deal with.
I reckon we're now, and I've just been reading more about the eugenics movement in the early 20th century. So she is interested in birth control, but like a lot of people, one of the reasons that she's interested in birth control is she's worried about, what she called the poor, the degenerate, the feeble-minded, are breeding too much. And it's a really difficult thing to reckon with, because huge numbers of intellectuals in Britain and elsewhere at the start of the 20th century were eugenicists. It was a perfectly respectable intellectual position to hold. That actually, wouldn't it be brilliant if we could solve all problems? And people, there weren't people going hungry and going poor because we just improved them all. Of course, it was absolutely laced through not just with classism, but really overt racism, based around the idea that Europeans were the sort of pinnacle of race, and everyone else,
intelligent ones at that.
Right, exactly, and civilized and naturally superior, and and there was a huge naivety about what it would mean in practice to say we want to improve the human race through selective breeding, which started off with sterilization of poor women, African Americans. And it culminated in what we see in the early phases of Nazi Germany, which is huge numbers of the disabled being shipped off to concentration camps. So it's not hard to see why eugenics has now got such a terrible, terrible reputation. But what the challenge is to hold all that in your mind alongside the fact that Mary Stopes is getting letters from people saying, I've had 9 children. My uterus is exhausted. The doctor says I'll die if I have another kid, but no one will tell me how not to do it. And that's a level of kind of personal misery that I don't think we have to, by and large, face in Britain today. There are just very few families with 10 children.
Absolutely.
Apart from in a couple of, minority communities. But you can see, what I think is really interesting is to put readers in the position where they can see how people came to terrible conclusions, you know, without excusing the terrible conclusions, but presenting them with the challenge of, do you really think in that situation you would have been better? I think it's a big question to ask about abolitionism and slavery too. You know, are you so confident in your moral rectitude that you've been brought up in this entire society built on this terrible, terrible foundation that you would have been one of the very small percentage of people who saw through it and campaigned against it? And
Absolutely.
what, if so, what do you think are the things that would have allowed you to do that, and how can we have more of them?